Hello. It took 30 hours for security forces to defeat al-Shabaab militants who stormed the hotel in Mogadishu, Somalia, and took hostages. At the end of the operation, 20 people were dead. Yesterday was a bad day for African boxing fans. Two prominent Nigerian boxers on the world stage, Anthony Joshua and Kamaru Usman, lost their title fights. In Nigeria, foreign airlines are threatening to abandon the Nigerian market due to $464 million fund currently trapped in Nigeria. Some airlines still operating in Nigeria are only issuing tickets in dollars. The Guardian newspapers this morning laid out how the Nigerian government squandered $22 billion in 12 years from the excess crude account. In an escalation of the $418 million Paris Club refund controversy, Ned Nwoko, one of the so-called consultants fighting for the money, revealed that Nigerian governors were lying about the money. He told the Sun newspaper that the governors took $100 million from the consultants to spend on elections in Ondo and Ekiti. He also said that the money owed to the consultants is only $68 million and not $418 million that Attorney General Abubakar Malami is fighting to have the finance minister send to the consultants. Afenifere leader Ayo Adebanjo told the Sun newspaper that Bola Tinubu and Abubakar Atiku are not qualified to contest for the 2023 presidency. He said that Afenifere, the Yoruba cultural group, will only support a power shift to the southeast. Delta State, Nigeria, was at a standstill yesterday as the publisher and editor-in-chief of This Day newspapers and Arise TV channel, Mr. Ndoka Obiaguna, buried his mom. It is 11:30 a.m. in New York City, 4:30 p.m. in Nigeria. Wherever in the world you are joining us, welcome to another episode of 90 Minutes Africa. I am Rudolph Okonkwo. My co-host, Chido Onoma, is off today. On our show today, we have Sonala Olumhense. Sonala is a veteran journalist, writer, and preeminent columnist. After studying political science at the University of Ibadan, he started his journalism career in 1979 at the Punch newspaper. He rose to become the acting editor of Sunday Punch. He was a foundation member of the Guardian editorial board in 1983. He rose to become the editorial page editor and chairman of the editorial board of the Guardian. He started his own newspaper in Lagos, and later he left and worked for the United Nations in Somalia and New York. Since 1980 to date, he has written consistently in Nigerian newspapers. At one point, he was writing 3 columns a week. Since July of 2013, he has been writing a weekly syndicated column under the Sonala Olumhense Syndicate, SOS. Many people do not know this, but Sonala is the author of the novel, No Second Chance. As for me, what summed up his wonderful career is this. He interviewed Chief Obafemi Awolowo when his mates were still chasing grasshoppers in the field. Sonala, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Rudolph.
Oh, wonderful. I didn't know so many things about you, and I'm so intimidated. I didn't know you were at the editorial board, even when I was still in primary school or something. But I'm so glad to have you on the show. And today we are going to talk about the role of the media in this coming election. And most of our viewers, they've always been talking about the media. They don't understand why the media in Nigeria is the way it is. So there's nobody I can think of in the whole wide world who can give the perspective that you have. Welcome.
Thank you very much.
All right, so let's start with the news, the current news. The first thing on any newspaper you can pick up today in Nigeria is about what happened in Delta State yesterday. Ndoka, the owner of This Day and Rise TV, buried his mom. And everybody in Nigeria, they were all there. Candidates for president, governors, it was unbelievable. This was and knowing Nduka as a media personality, this is somebody I think you know very well. So what do you think is the role Nduka, if you look at Nduka as an owner of a media house, a major media house in Nigeria, and his relationship with all these politicians and how that impacts the role that media plays in Nigeria?
Thank you. First of all, let me clarify that I was Nduka's first editor in 1986 when he set up This Week newspaper, This Week news magazine, one of those early news magazines in the country. It was published every Monday, printed in London every week, and shipped to Nigeria. I know Nduka pretty well as a person and as a friend. He has over the years grown. He set up This Day, and as publisher and chief executive of that organization, yesterday was a very good uh, indication of who he really is. The fact that he was able to pull people from everywhere to attend his mother's event in Delta State, Nigeria. Even people, from what I read and what I hear, even people came from outside the country to attend that event. And Nigeria is not an easy place to travel in these days. These days, Nduka is also a question when it comes to the media. I have told you what answer he has provided, namely, he owns media organizations. The question is that he's also very close to the powers that be, which is why so many people follow him.
Yeah.
They travel with him, wherever he's going in the world. When he calls them, they come. Covering Nigeria, in fact, covering any political environment is difficult enough. When the chief executive of of a media organization, therefore, is that close to the political powers that be, it is the degree of difficulty before the journalists in that organization or in his organizations is more magnified. So when you have an election such as the one that we face next year coming up, there are significant difficulties before the media, but in particular before organizations such as the one that he heads, the one that he owns and heads.
Okay.
Yeah.
So let's look at this. The other story that is connected to the media in the news was the Nigerian Broadcasting Commission, NBC. They withdrew the licenses of some TV stations and media and newspaper. I think there are TV stations and radio stations like AIT because they were owing. So what does that say about the media in Nigeria? That especially at this point in time, we're about to go into an election, and these 52 media houses and radio stations their licenses are withdrawn, and they are asked to close down shop.
Yeah. I believe in the rule of law. I believe that if you are in a legal relationship, you should discharge your obligations. That holds also in business. If you have a business organization and it has dues to pay to the government, those dues ought to be paid. That said, the Nigerian business environment is not normal. Many things are very, very difficult, which is why you find that a lot of businesses have been pulling out of Nigeria since 2014, the final year of Dr. Goodluck Jonathan, but particularly since 2015, when the current government took over. These difficulties have been heightened since COVID hit the world, hit Nigeria from 2020. in some parts of the world, some governments have stepped forward to help key organizations such as key areas of the economy, such as aviation and the media. In Nigeria, the government does not even help itself, let alone citizens, let alone businesses. So if the media, we all know how much it has tried, the Muhammad Buhari administration has tried to control the media, both the formal and informal media. And this particular development where mass media organizations are overnight simply eliminated, as it were, does not seem to me to be a situation where the government is merely trying to make certain that organizations actually live up to their expectation. It's more like a control tool to me.
All right. So let's take a break and look at a video of what happened last week. That was when APC's presidential candidate Bola Tinubu visited Olusegun Obasanjo. When we come back from that video, I'll ask you about Obasanjo that you knew when you started reporting in the 70s to Obasanjo that we have now and his role in Nigeria. All right. That was Bola Tinubu visiting Olusegun Obasanjo. So for someone who has been in the media for all these years, when you hear or watch stories like this, what goes in your mind? What do you think about the country?
I think the country is running around in circles. Let's remember that Obasanjo has been around, if not in governance, since I believe 1976. He has ruled this country twice. He knows what is wrong and what is right. When he has had his opportunities, he has not always done the right thing. He has not always said the right thing. As a matter of fact, it's more a question of Obasanjo doing the wrong things when in power, particularly the second time around when he was voted in. Let's assume that the votes that brought him into power, the voting was fair. He was in power for 8 years from 1999. Many of the things that went wrong after when he left office were things that he actually created, problems that he actually created. So when you see some, before I move on, remember that he was now, after he had seen APC empower in Buhari's first term, he was the author of the phrase, the third force. He thought that these two parties, PDP and APC, could not lead Nigeria into the future of the 6. But as soon as he had people thinking that way, and he got people together to start to advocate and to work towards the third force, Obasanjo abandoned them. He abandoned them as soon as he started talking about it and actually meeting and setting up. Now, here we are. APC is about to be kicked out of power, perhaps to be kicked out of power. At least there is a chance at the transition to something else. But he's meeting with the very same people and holding hands with them and hugging them. This is wrong. Now, after the meeting with Bola Tinubu, there were speculations as to what actually happened. And Tinubu's people took advantage of the situation to go announcing that the meeting meant that Obasanjo had approved of Tinubu and that Tinubu would be the next president. In the media today, there have been denials, but that damage is done. We cannot have old men who go elsewhere in the world and do a lot of preaching as to what is right. Come home to us and show us what is wrong.
That's interesting. Just so for the purpose of those watching, at the top of the hour at 12:30, we are going to let our audience members join us, and they will have an opportunity to talk to Sonala. And that's a very important thing, because I know that most people are interested in what the media is doing and why Nigerian media is the way it is. So let me ask you about the media. You have worked for the United Nations. You've covered the world, and you watch the media in America and the UK. What is peculiar about the Nigerian media? How do you assess the Nigerian media many years after independence and many years after we returned to democracy?
What is wrong with the Nigerian media is that its ability to reporting is the first and main order of business of the media. Reporting. What is wrong with the Nigerian media is that its ability to report has over the years diminished. A part of it is that more and more of the ownership of the media has gone into the hands of politicians and profit hunters. And at some point or the other, those two agents always manage to merge. Politicians will go to the profit hunters who own some aspects of the media or another and collude with them. Profit hunters who are making a profit from owning the media, media companies will go to politicians. They collude. What this has meant is that they will then use the journalists, they will now control the journalists in their employ and compel them to report Nigeria the way they want. Their reporting becomes more and more favorable to the people that they like, their friends in politics, across the fence, wherever they meet. Much of this is done at night, away from the glare. Okay. The other thing is this: the media has not helped itself either, because very often they too move close to these people, the people who own. Let's call them the people who own, whether in politics or in business. They move close to the. Now, if you accept a gift, if you're an editor, you accept a gift from a politician once, he owns you. He owns you. What is it? He gives you a gift to go to. He gives you a ticket to travel someplace, or he gives you a Christmas $10,000 for Christmas. He owns you. Even if you refuse, you come to your senses after that, and you say no to the second attempted gift. It's too late, and this has permeated the newsrooms, with younger journalists being compromised or compelled to live the same lifestyle. These are the two main things that have made life increasingly difficult for the media in Nigeria, to be made difficult for them to be effective.
Now, what about a compensation? because sometimes this is looked at in isolation with compensation. Most reporters, if you talk to them today, they say that they are not well paid. When you started, were reporters well paid, that they resist the temptation of being compromised by politicians?
Yes. When I started my career at the Punch, as you said at the top of the show. When I started my career, I think my paycheck was 300 naira. That was in 1979.
Mm,
My rent was 150 naira. I had 150 naira to live on. You know, um, I could. Things were not as expensive as that.
mm,
Now, but again, the point what I want to point out is that I wasn't in charge. I was not on the business end at the Punch. This was an ongoing, a flourishing organization when I got there. Now, when I moved to the Guardian, I was even better paid. My pay, my uh, rent alone, what do they call it? What I was given for accommodation alone was far more than what I was being paid, total of what I was being paid at the Punch. But more important, what's more important there is that what they were, there was a conscious attempt made at the Guardian to make sure that reporters were well remunerated.
mm.
And so it was, they were also schooled to understand that there was a good reason behind that, namely that no reporter of the Guardian was ever to be caught accepting a bribe from anyone, because you will lose your job the same day. I realize that that has changed. Not only are reporters more poorly paid today, they often don't get their pay as and when due. So that also pushes them into um, possibly being compromised by those who own, those who have.
Mm.
So that's these are all very important issues in the problem.
Yeah, especially now, if you look at the news, we are talking about newspapers or TV stations or radio stations not being able to pay their dues, which tells you that if they don't pay their dues, most likely they are not paying their reporters. If they don't think it's important to pay people that will make sure that their licenses are okay and they can be on air, they are not likely going to pay people who are working for them. But what is responsible for this change? I don't want to mention the name of the publisher, but we hear about publishers, not just one, telling reporters that the position I gave you is for you to use it to make a living. So I'm not going to give you this position and I'm going to pay you again. You have to be stupid to have this position and expect payment from me. So under that situation, what do you expect reporters to do?
I do not have an answer for that specific problem question. I have an answer to that auxiliary question, which
Mm,
is that the entire mass media has this problem.
mm,
Some of them are not really managed as business entities, um, so that a publisher or broadcaster who can afford 20 or 25 employees hires 50 or 70. Okay, they don't have a structure that's capable of bringing in the resources, of earning the resources to keep the organization going. That's one part of it. The other part of it is that some of these owners are often simply greedy. They have no commitment to the mass media. It's just another investment for them. If it's yielding a lot of resources, that's fine. Where it has difficulty, then they throw the reporters, the professionals, into the middle of the storm. They refuse to pay them or pay them late. I have seen instances where a media house will be owing for 7 months or more. So it's difficult for those reporters. Again, because the business environment is so bad, a reporter cannot easily get up and say, "Oh, I retire, I quit, I'm going someplace else," because it may just be the situation may be worse where he's going.
mm. So now, being that we know that, and I've interviewed some reporters who try to own media houses themselves. We know that Ndoka was once a cartoonist, I believe, and you tried to own a media house. You started one in Lagos. So, what is if the ownership, change in ownership may change the fortune of reporters, but what's the difficulty in trying to start your own media house? To run it professionally, because sometimes we have politicians start media houses, you have people who are interested in profit, but when a reporter starts one, and what are the difficulties?
The principal difficulty is in raising the funds. There isn't a money market in the sense that we know it in the developed economies. When you approach a bank, and I know this from personal experience, when you approach a bank, it's a whole new world. There are all kinds of tricks. In my own case, I was very well received the first day, and they wanted me to bring in my proposal. I sent in my proposal the following week, and they were going to get back to me the week after that. That's 2 weeks from when I submitted the proposal. And I didn't hear from them. So I went back to the bank to see the manager. He had traveled. He was away for a month. Didn't mention, okay, perhaps he didn't have the obligation to inform me, but he was away for a month. And when he came back, he didn't inform me either. I went back there and he said to me, "Oh, you have a brilliant proposal, but we really will not be lending funds at this time." That kind of thing. What we need in Nigeria, some kind of system where entrepreneurs, they don't have to be in the media, entrepreneurs can borrow funds on the basis of the quality of their business proposal. In Nigeria, that environment doesn't exist. You invariably go to an individual businessman or to a financial outfit, which discourages you. So it's easy to start, but you will not be able to continue.
Now, okay. Now let's move along to online media, because there's been a change with online media. It made it easier for people to start newspapers and radio stations without the need to have to print the hard copy and things like that. Has that changed things?
No, because it's deceptive to think that because you can register a name that you can have a media outfit. Okay, because you won't have the problems of newsprint, gigantic machines, and all kinds of things to print your product and so on. Lavish newsrooms, but intrinsically, you're still required to go if you want to proceed as a professional organization. You're still going to have to do everything else. Get the appropriate personnel who will report and edit, who will vet. Okay, be able to develop the organ in such a way that it can sell, it can attract attention, and make a name for itself. This all take time to develop, and in Nigeria, there are far more people jumping into it to start than there is really a market for you.
Now, I know that you are familiar with Sahara Reporters, Premium Times, and all the other online media. Most people think that they've been able to sustain credible media in Nigeria, that without them, the mainstream media would have been worse than what they are today. Do you buy that idea?
I do.
Okay.
I do. But only in a few cases. A few of them have broken through, been able to make that image and so on. But if you do not know the truth, you would think that it's from the subscribers to these organizations and so on. But a number of them actually, rely on support from outside the country that's offered by international organizations that
NGOs.
that's perhaps the only reason. But they've demonstrated that there is a market. What I think some of these organizations that have succeeded have done is that they demonstrate that there is a market. Sahara Reporters has its problems at the moment, but if you look at what it has done, along with what organizations such as Premium Times, what they have achieved, they've shown that you can go out there and do it if you are set up right. Okay, to that extent, they lead the way in the market, and they again and again they come up with stories, the big stories that the print and other media do not get or bother even to chase. They are coming up with all the big stories and analysis and editorials that the media houses of old, with all their place in the media, in the market, that they don't have any access to today.
Now let's talk about Sahara, because I know that Omoyele Show, right? And he has joined the politicians. So what do you think about that transition? Because typically, if you look at the history of Nigeria, Nnamdi Azikiwe, you look at Obafemi Awolowo, people like that, some of them started the media houses first, and then use it to support their political adventures. So what do you think about Shore's transition?
Given what Shore always chased, namely to combat corruption in Nigeria, was going to get to a point where he needed to step outside his newsroom to go and try to fulfill some of these goals. But I think that to a large extent, I think he succeeded. I remember that the late ambassador of Nigeria to the United States told me that the first thing he did every day was read Sahara Reporters. Every day. And he told me that the same thing applied to his people, his colleagues in Abuja. Now, so to an extent, Sahara Reporters shook the nation awake to an extent. Now, in making the transition to politics, I think that Shore made a mistake because he kept the organization structured as it was when he was running it. I believe he needed to change the template and let somebody else run it. Because if you notice what's happening in Nigeria now, the rest of the mass media does not cover Shore as a politician. I rarely even see his name mentioned anywhere else. I feel that would have been different if he asked or hired other professionals to run the place. If he put the thing in a trust and then let other people run it as professionals, in which case he would have just been one of the subjects that they covered.
So, but his political adventure, what do you think about his quest to be president of Nigeria?
He's a citizen. He's entitled to it. Does he have the experience? Does he have the preparation? To me, as somebody who for several years helped at Sahara Reporters, I don't think so. I think my own experience of him as an administrator leaves me in some doubt as to whether he can run a country. But what experience is it that all of the others have brought to Abuja? Some of the people that we thought had the quote-unquote experience to run Nigeria have surprised us with just how incompetent they are, with just how poor their hearts are as Nigerians. So yes, if he, I don't know whether I will be, if he asked me, for instance, to come and work for his government, whether I would be going. I have not accepted any other offers either. But I think that he has a message. If Nigerians buy that message, he should go for it.
Okay, so talking about these people running for president today, we have three major candidates: P2B, Bola Tinubu, and Abubakar Atiku Abubakar. So when you look at these three major candidates, what do you think about each of them?
I have covered Atiku Abubakar for many years, Bola Tinubu for many years, um, and beyond whatever I have written or read, I know that none of them has really come forward to provide for Nigerians, not for me, to provide for Nigerians anything near a satisfactory explanation of just who they are, let alone where they are going.
Mm.
I don't know Peter Obi beyond his having been governor of Anambra State, but I know that the first question to answer, as I was writing last week, is who are you as a person? Okay, where have you been? Tell me who you are. Justify to me that you mean well, that you have been in a place that I can respect. If you can't tell me who you are and justify your career, don't tell me what you are going to do for me. You can't tell me what you are going to do for me because that question of character comes first. No, so Peter Obi, has he been an angel? I would doubt that he has been an angel, that he is an angel. But are we looking to elect an angel? Are we going to be able to find an angel to elect? I don't think so. For me, given what I know about the three of them, if I had to vote, and I don't have a vote, I live abroad, and Nigeria, the Nigerian establishment hates diasporans. They don't want us to have a voice at home. If I had a vote and you gave me these three candidates, I would certainly vote for Peter Obi.
There's something that people talk about. They now blame the media for pushing them to vote for uh, Buhari in the 2015 election. Of course, we know that several people in the media pointed out the dangers of voting for Buhari, but it's been forgotten. At this current season, we already know that the media did the work, for instance, pointing out each of these candidates, the problem they have. A good example is the issue of, you mentioned character now, and the issue of Bola Tinubu, the question about his age, his school he attended, everything that has been in public space. But it doesn't seem to resonate with the people. But what happens when, if he becomes president and certain things they now end up becoming a problem, the blame will be on the media for not saying these things. When you hear stuff like that, how do you react?
No, I believe that the media is saying, as much of the media as possible is saying what needs to be said. But let us remember, the campaigns haven't started. The political campaigns are not due for another month.
Yes.
So what we are looking at, what we're experiencing now, these are just preliminary skirmishes. Okay. When the campaigns start and people are going to now formally start to appeal to the electorate, that's when we will hear we'll get to brass tacks. So I think that there is plenty of time. As for 2015, yes, there are many people who look at Buhari's collapse. I call it collapse. I call it, it's not just failure. In Buhari's collapse in office, and they use that to say this is why it should not have been voted for in 2015. Perhaps. But let's go back to 2015. In 2015, it was Buhari or Jonathan. Jonathan didn't have a chance because of all of the things that he had done and said, and all the things that he was at the time involved with. This was a man who told the country he didn't want to declare his assets. He said he didn't give a damn. He said corruption was overstated, things like that. okay, this was as things were going bad. And on the other hand was a man who was saying all of the right things. Now, unless you tell me that there was a third figure that was, that was there that people could have chosen, then you really don't really have a germane argument to say that Buhari should not have been voted for in 2015. Buhari collapsed, and it will be a historic story. Can't tell much of it now until he's out because we know what will happen. But it was the only answer at that time.
Why did Buhari collapse? Do you know?
Yes, Buhari, when he came to power on the basis of his experience between 1983 and 1985. At that time, they had just kicked out the NPN, the Second Republic, and they ruled by decree. Everything they said was with immediate effect. Everything. And because you had to obey, we did. Now, Buhari returned to power under a completely different scheme of things, the rule of law. Now, if you listen to him carefully, if you analyze him, he has ruled by orders. I have ordered them to do this. Okay, which is the same thing as with immediate effect. I have given directives to the security chiefs. This is basically how he has proceeded. But when you in a democratic system, it doesn't work that way. You discuss and then you enact policy. It is policy that you implement and you push through to see through the implementation. You can correct things along the way, but it's by means of policy that you govern. He has no policies. He came into power to find that he could not very well be issuing edicts any longer. And the party, the APC, was bigger than him. The problems in front of him in Nigeria bigger than him. He's a slow reader, as he has told us. So nothing was going to work, and everything has become worse.
Okay, let me play two videos, then I'll ask you a question around them. One is Buhari talking about oil subsidy before he became president.
If anybody said he is subsidizing anything, he is a fraud. So all these people talking about subsidy, who is subsidizing? But there is so much fraud, as I said, and explained correctly, that I don't talk about it. But the day I have to talk about it, I will ask the petroleum economists to come and tell me who is subsidizing Nigerian oil.
But I will try to be simple. Power generation is not rocket science. It's just generator. So just remember and imagine that your I better pass my neighbor in 1 million times its capacity, but in one place. So if you can make that size of 1 kilowatt, you can make a power turbine of 1,000 megawatts. That's that simple.
All right. The first one was Buhari talking about oil subsidy, and that was before he became president. He became president, and he's also, people forget, he's the minister for petroleum in Nigeria today.
Yeah.
And everything went south. I mean, horrible. We don't refine our crude oil. They're stealing most of the crude oil, and the country is not making money, even while Saudi Arabia is declaring billions of dollars in profit. The NNPC is spending money without making anything. So, and then you have Fashola, Babatunde Fashola, talking about oil power generation as something very easy during the campaign. And he was made a minister, and he failed to deliver. So you can say that Buhari maybe didn't have it in him, whatever anybody could say. But what about Fashola? And how do you expect the Nigerian voter, listening to the current politicians saying what they will do, when they've listened to these people and they failed.
Exactly. This goes back to the previous question about 2015. Okay, Jonathan and Buhari, it's the same thing. At that time, Jonathan didn't stand a chance because Buhari appeared to have these answers. If you listen to him at that time talking about oil subsidy, you were not going to listen to Jonathan trying to justify it. Okay, if you listen, and then you have Fashola, who had a very good image. He even had a chance of running for president because of some of the work he had done as governor of Lagos State. Okay, so when he said some of those things, you were encouraged. These are people who will come to power and finally resolve these problems. Well, they came to power and made the problems worse. Part of it being that they were not really prepared. Buhari, for instance, if you recall, came to office without an economic advisor. He didn't have an economic advisor when he took the job. He didn't appoint one. Why? Because he was going to solve the problems with immediate effect, by edicts, by orders, by directives. It doesn't work. Nothing in government works like that. Governments work according to a plan. You have the people who know. The president doesn't stay awake, working over spreadsheets and things. The government has experts or hires experts to do these things so that you can come up with a plan to resolve perceived or previously identified problems. In this system, there is no such thing. But it's actually worse than that, in my view. There is no government. There is no government. What we have is a system that puts people in place and then they go away. The president doesn't see these ministers. Everybody knows that. He doesn't see them for purposes of sitting down to discuss things. Holding the Federal Executive Council meeting for a couple of hours on a Wednesday afternoon, it does not substitute for those sessions in which documents are reviewed, project plans are examined. Buhari never remembers that a project was commissioned. Our projects never have deadlines, so that you know that this particular job, this project that has been kicked off today will be delivered in 18 months' time. That 18 months' time is not just a month, it will be a date. We don't do it. And so everything is running into each other, the problems grow, and nobody is in charge.
All right. Just a reminder, in another 10 minutes, we are going to get our audience involved in the conversation. Let's go to your career in journalism, and let's start with, so how did you sustain your column? You've been writing for more than 40 years. How are you not tired? I mean, this is a major, I admire you, and I know a lot of people do. And we think that part of the problems, the problem we have in the media is that people like you have abandoned the media, like people you started with. I don't know how many of them are still bothering about Nigeria, writing about Nigeria. So you have a lot of inexperienced people in Nigeria doing the media thing, and nobody guiding them, mentoring them. So how do you sustain this interest in Nigeria?
Thank you. I consider that to be a compliment. When I entered the media in 1979, I really wanted to be there for a very short while. I was thinking about 5, maybe 10 years. What I wanted to do was to write books. I wanted to be a novelist. I wanted to be like Chinua Achebe. That's where my head was. And that's why I wrote No Second Chance. I didn't see it as an only novel. I saw it as a first novel. But then, as the years went by, these problems that you thought were just passing problems that Nigeria will resolve never got resolved, never went away. They seem to become worse every year. And so if you ask me what has sustained me. Probably just outrage, just anger, just the hurt that we can be like this. You watch another country, just continue on the upward trajectory, making progress because of its commitment to the people. So wherever I went, I always wanted to write. As a matter of fact, it affected me negatively when I went, when I traveled out of the country, came to the United States, because I didn't. I always wanted to leave that room to be able to write, to contribute to the process in Nigeria. And so there were places that I went to and opportunities that I lost because I needed to structure my time and myself in such a way that I could continue to participate. Now, did I know that that would stretch to 20 years? No, but about 20 years after I started, the Obasanjo came, the this current system came, and then you thought, well, here we are, we have a new opportunity. We have, and this system is working. Actually, at that time, I was going to bring my family back to Nigeria. I wanted my children to go to school in Nigeria. That's why when you were asking last question last week, do you want your children to speak your language? I ran away. Now, I wanted my children to enjoy this culture in which I grew up. But unfortunately, we couldn't make it work. How did I know that another 20 years would run by? No. They offered me a job under the Obasanjo administration, and I didn't take it. I'm glad now that I didn't take it. At that time, I considered it in 2003 because I thought this man may have made a mistake in his first term, but he had said he's going to correct them. I'm glad now I didn't take that chance. Look at where we are.
Now, do you know how many columns you've written over the years?
No, I do not know.
Do you have them?
I have some of them. I think I have most of them. Some of the stuff that I wrote, luckily the Punch has a full library. The Punch has a full library, and they were good enough to give me all of my stuff that I wrote from August the 1st, 1979, when I walked into that newsroom until 2 years ago. So I do have that. Okay. The Guardian has nothing.
That's interesting.
Yes, the Guardian has no records, no archives.
Yes. Wanted to talk about this media and archiving of the media, the newspapers in Nigeria. Why is it that we don't have that? Do they know that you can read the New York Times from 18-something till today? You can find them online.
Yes.
Why is that?
I can read every copy of the New York Times right here as I speak to you. That's, I can research. Our people, on the other hand, think it's a favor. They think it's a favor to you, to the reader, to be able to get yesterday's newspaper. And so when you ask them about a paper they published 10 years ago, they're surprised. They don't think they should have the physical paper. But now it's actually easier because you don't have to maintain the physical paper. Okay? When you can have the electronic, keep it more cheaply electronically. There is no commitment. They don't even know what they published in the past. They have no. I have read editorials written by The Guardian, for instance, in which they were contradicting editorials that they wrote in the past. Things like that. So we have no archives, which means no history. How do you have a sense of whom you are? How can you talk about the future if you have no sense of the past? And that's the only person I know who has and I speak about a corporate person who has a large library is the Gani Fawahimi Library in Lagos. They have almost everything since independence. I don't know how long it will last because it's in hard copy, and neither the state government, the Ghanese friends, the federal government have shown any interest in supporting that library so that they can keep digitize everything that they have.
All right, that's very interesting because unless it's digital, we are not sure it could be preserved. Anything could happen to the building, to the
Absolutely.
papers. So it's not a way to preserve things these days. All right,
Absolutely.
we are going to take a break, and when we come back, we will continue the conversation.
My people, look here, face me like Facebook. Now go see Lisa, now go see na chameleon. Time don't come for us to wake up. My people, it's not time for action. Yeah. No more talk. We know how, yeah, leaders, we don't tire. Yeah, this situation, we don't need you.
Them say, the way you lay your bed, now so you go lie on top. When you sell your votes, not poverty, you dey invite to make you shine your eye.
Make you no sell your vote, no shishi for bribe. If you talk, you say, and I talk, you say, no shishi for bribe. If you talk, and I talk, and we all the talk, you say, no shishi for bribe. You say, no shishi for bribe. You say, no shishi for bribe. If you sell your vote, sell opportunity, sell your tomorrow.
You say good roads, good health, and education.
Them say the way you lay your bed, that's so you go lie on top. They go try to buy with chichi, make you no say your future for chichi. Them go surely take them back with profit, now you go suffer. Suffer, Naija. Monkey go dey walk, bamboo go dey shop. Say that's how we go dey. Make you not sell your photo, no shishi for bribe.
If I do my part and you do your part,
No shishi for bribe. Make we play our part and we build this land. No shishi for bribe. You say no shishi for bribe. You say no shishi for bribe. Nigeria go better.
Corruption kill us, bribery finish us. Last, Chuku still got us. Who want change Nigeria but us? Let's make it work again, everybody rise again. Tire for the talk, nobody want do the work. Nobody want die there, I speak with no fear. Change out for them, you can't buy my soul. No shishi for your votes, this not the new votes. How much is your vote really worth? How much they want give you for the pain? If we choose wrong, then waiting we gain. My brother, waiting we gain.
I don't go sell your future to some criminals who don't get the conscience. Don't be say we go just did the fun vex and still allow nonsense for another 4 years. Cause my people still dead jobless. Every day my people.
All right. Welcome back. We are, for those who are just joining us, we are talking to the great Sonala, very, very famous Nigerian writer and journalist and columnist. I write columns. I pretend that I write columns. But if you read Sonala in 600 words, 800 words, he will capture what ordinary people will spend. I spend like 1,200 words trying to say something. No, it's amazing. And I'm not saying this because you're here. A lot of people who had this when they knew I was going to talk to you, they all reached out to me and said, this is somebody that they've admired for years. So we are having a conversation on the media and Nigeria and what is going on as we approach 2023. So let's continue with the conversation. We have about 2 more minutes before we invite our audience members to join. I will share the link very, very soon. But let me ask you, when you wrote the novel, No Second Chance, what was the publishing process at that time? Is it different from what we have now in Nigeria? And why didn't you write more? Or maybe you wrote more, but you didn't publish. Can you share that with us?
Yes, those my days of innocence. As I said earlier, the way that I conceived of my life was as a novelist, not as a journalist. But I was fascinated by journalism because it was always there as I was growing up, run to the newspapers on the streets. I have the opportunity once in a while to read the newspapers. And then when I went to secondary school, I bought my newspapers, almost, whenever I could. I always was the person that people came to for newspapers. Now, once I finished the draft of that novel, you have to remember that this was longhand, I found somebody to type it, which taught me a lesson. You have to learn to type. So I learned to type by on the roadside and at the Juelegba.
Wow.
Yeah.
You went to typing school?
I went to typing school, yes.
Wow.
ASDF. colon LKJ. So I then took it to Longman, and they accepted it from me, gave me a receipt, and I didn't know how the process was supposed to work. The following week, I was expecting to hear from them. It took months. They did, and they told me that they accepted it for publishing, and really that was it. Other strange things happened later. I got a letter from some publisher in Russia, telling me that they really liked my book and they wanted to translate it into Russian. It was kind of crazy. I didn't know any Russian. I didn't know what that was. They were and they paid me. They sent me. So things like that. I wanted to write, but it was always a question of, I have like 8 unfinished manuscripts,
Wow.
different stories in various places. Hopefully I'll be the writer. God gives me life. I'll be the writer, the man who wrote his novels in his old age.
It doesn't matter the age, we
Yes.
want the stories.
Yeah.
Now, let me, for our audience now, because I've shared our link, I want to apologize that there is a filter that Sonala's computer probably is, we don't know, couldn't figure out what was going on. And that's the issue with live TV. When we started this, it was late. We can't stop everything. The show has to go on. But there's a filter in his system that is giving him these eyelashes that you're seeing. It's very, very normal, like everybody else. All right. So were you paid by Longman? Any advance?
I was paid by Longman. They gave me a check for 44 naira. I'm serious. They gave me a check for 44 naira, and it was not what I was hearing about other writers, particularly abroad. So I thought it was a joke, and that something bigger would happen. And I said to myself, this is so funny. I will never spend this money. Let me just put it on my wall, which I did for a long time. Then one day I was so broke that
But no other payment since then.
No, not from Longman. Not from Longman. Yeah, the Russian publisher, on the other hand, sent a check for about £1,300. Yeah, which they asked me for an account, and I gave them my friend's account in London, which they paid in, and that was how I bought my first. That was how I bought my first computer. So I don't know whether they sent any other funds in there. I was never informed. I wasn't interested.
Wow, that's amazing. Some people today they've not been able to make that amount of money from their books. So the Russians did well for you.
They did.
All right. So let's bring in our viewers to join us and join the conversation. I have 2 people here already. If you want to join, this is the link again to join the conversation. Wembasi, I know you are in New York, and welcome to the show.
Thank you very much, Rudy.
Okay.
And how are you, sir? Thank you for your very, very entertaining interview.
Thank you. Can I begin by saying one quick thing?
Go ahead.
I want to apologize for the quality of my eyes. I promise you that Rudolph has seen me personally, and he knows that my eyes are actually a little better than this. I don't know what this is about. Why I have these eyeballs today.
I live in New York, so you can be a he or a she or a he she, and it's very acceptable.
Or a they or them. Yes.
Okay. Go ahead, Wayne. What question do you have for him?
Oh, I thought you were going to introduce other panelists before.
No, we go from one person to the other. Yeah.
Well, I'm sitting in awe, and what really tweaked me was the record keeping by, or lack of it, by our national dailies. You know, I studied political science at the University of Uyo. 1979, my father ran for House of Representatives, representing Uyo municipality. So we were avid newspaper readers in my family, and just to hear that, like, the National Guardian does not have an archive system, you know, is so shocking to me. Do you see that as an avenue of business for individuals in Nigeria to go into business of archiving our national dailies and other published materials in Nigeria?
Absolutely, yes, I do. But the way the system is that you probably can only start from the present, you know, from today's newspapers, from today's media, because you may not be able to find a copy of yesterday's newspaper to save. Now for the print in particular, if you have to, we complain now about how badly the naira has fallen against respected international currencies. You have to remember that we don't produce newsprint. We don't produce newsprint. It's all imported.
Wow.
I don't know where our media houses are getting their newsprint now. They'll have to pay through the nose, and we basically don't have a nose now. So from what I've heard, very few of them were even printing up before this collapse of the naira, printing up to 10,000 copies a day. So I don't know exactly what's happening now. So it's a business opportunity, but I think it can only probably flourish from now on for whoever takes advantage. We'll still need to know what has happened at least since independence, October 1, 1960. We want all of those newspapers, we want their accounts. Is the only way we can get a sense of how we got to where we are today.
Thank you so much. Ovie, you're next.
Good day, yo. Thank you to our guests. My question centers around the coming election. Based on your experience, having worked with a lot of politicians, from back in the days to this point, do you think it's a mistake on candidates like Obi part for not investing in the media space before now? I said that based on the fact that people like Bola Tinubu, Atiku have invested heavily in the media space, both newspaper, television, and radio. And other than that, they are ready to spend as much as it takes to control the editorial room and every other aspect of the media. And people like Ponkoso, who understands largely his base, have decided to focus on the BBC Hausa based on the fact that there are about 16 to 17 million listeners daily within that part of the country to BBC Hausa and the Chinese radio. But people like Obi are focused on, one would say, internet news to reach its base. And we all know, the fraction of people that actually get their news from that space. So do you think it's a mistake on his own part not to invest in the media space, and saying that, I know they give shishi in terms of how to get this message out? Because when the campaign actually started, this big media that we all know about, we focus on these two political candidates based on what they have to offer and what they have invested in the past.
Okay.
Your basic question is whether it's a mistake that will be the non-event in the media. My answer is no. There's no mistake. Actually, I think that that's an advantage for is this an advantage for any politician who is not who does not possess a media house or several media houses. The reason is this: you can, I mean, none of us here we can each basically say today we want to run for office, but why should not owning a branch of the media or a media house be a disadvantage in appealing to the voter? Now, the people who own these media houses that you have referred to have their weaknesses. We know that they have their weaknesses, and some of the things, among the things they are going to have to justify is how they came about those media houses. On the other hand, candidates who don't own these places can use other means to appeal to the electorate. Those means exist. Luckily for these candidates, luckily for this particular election cycle, you and I are standing here, as I was telling the moderator earlier, the campaigns have not even started. We have another month to go before these campaigns start. Okay. And so you have the opportunity to actually plan to reach voters wherever they may be. The problem in Nigeria is not the media, it's the insecurity. Because, but for the insecurity, this level of insecurity that we have in Nigeria today, you can actually reach people in the grassroots wherever they are. Notwithstanding, there are ways, and I believe they're exploring these ways of reaching the grassroots. It's a different kind of election, and I don't think that coming out to tell the world that you are as wealthy as you really are, particularly when they cannot really find, you cannot really say where your investments are or how you came by all of your wealth. Um, so I think it's a different kind of election, and we'll see what happens.
Okay, thank you so much. Neka, you're next.
Oh, okay. Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you to our guests. But please, I just want to ask, I know that in so many professions, they have a code or a law binding them. So, and I know that you mentioned about the owners of some of these news media being close to some of the politicians. So my question is there any law in journalism that at least that would prohibit such things from happening, and especially to their journalists that will report on news? Is there any code of law that will at least stop them from not being biased? I don't know if my question is clear.
Your question, yes, thank you, Neka. Your question is very clear. Yes, journalism is that area of the jungle that anybody can really enter. But even in a jungle, there are paths. There are paths to where you are going. Journalism has ethics, or is supposed to have ethics. You do not have to go through a journalism school to learn of its ethics. It's not the only trade that you can enter without formal training. However, when you go in, you're supposed to be guided by its ethics. Unfortunately, in Nigeria, what often happens is that people set up media houses and they appoint the people, they do not look for the best professionals necessarily, they look for the people who will best serve their interests. So if that is the kind of structure that you have, then everything would always, the ethics of the profession would always be secondary to your own ambitions. So these are some of the problems that the media has, and you find journalists who have joined the rat race without leaving the profession. So they too are chasing money and building houses and things like that. It's This is why I say, at some point, if you are really looking for information that you can respect, that you can quote, you can say, I believe in. I'm using this information because I believe in the organization from which I have received it. You're going to have to that's a filter that you yourself will develop. You can't, if you know that an organization belongs to such and such a person or organization. In other words, if a newspaper, in effect, not by registration, in effect belongs to a political party, an identified political party. If I were you, I would not take their word for it. I'm going to look for a paper that is not dependent on an individual or a political party or a particular kind of idea, other than reporting the news the best that they can. Reporting is at the heart of journalism. Unfortunately, we are not doing as well in Nigeria in this regard. And because of that, or a consequent ancillary is that our media often dispenses with follow-up. You report a story, you're supposed to provide the reader with follow-up. What happened later? What happened next? We don't do it. Often because when the governor says, I'm going to build a 450 room hotel in the city by June next year. June next year comes, there is no hotel in that place. It's easier to quote the governor making another promise than to say, Governor, you said this hotel will open on June the 30th. And June the 30th was yesterday. So there are many things you just have the real ethics in governing or journalism. There is just like most everything else in Nigeria. Sometimes they come these days they come second to everything else.
All right, thank you so much. Nika, you wanted to follow up. Let me get to other people when we have time. If you have time at the end, you can have another chance. CM, it's your turn.
Okay. Okay. Thank you, Rudolph, and then thank you, our esteemed guest, Sonala. As a person, I've been reading you for ages. I would
Don't say
say so. I was introduced to you by your friend Boroja Uzato.
okay,
So
Maxim.
he says so much.
Look, I
He
put on my
writes so
glasses.
much about you. He taught me history in secondary school. So
Okay.
since then I don't miss you. In fact, whenever, even if it's old, the one you wrote in the 80s, if I see it, I read. Now my question is this. So you are quite a seasoned writer.
Thank you.
People often say that Nigerian journalists are like international airport taxis. They are always available for hire. I want you to give us a frank assessment of journalism in Nigeria from 1999 to date. Just be honest, the practice. Because to me, in Nigeria, our journalism, they've contributed so much to underdevelopment of Nigeria. They have contributed more than any other profession to underdeveloping that country because of one, sectionalism, and then not reporting like you analyzed, and then just sheer, I don't know, is it mediocrity or I can't just say then unprofessionalism. Let me just put it this way. So can I have your frank assessment from 1999 to date? Because that will give us what to expect in the next few months as we move to 2023.
I think you have assessed it. Yeah. The 1999 until now actually is an easy reporting period because unlike much of the period before that, I would say 1960 to 1999, we now have more tools to report the environment. I was mentioning to Rudolph earlier, when I started work at the Punch in August 1979, we had only one telephone. I'm talking about the Punch newspaper. One telephone. Now, if your reporter in Kaduna had a story that he wanted to give to the newsroom in Lagos, you didn't have a fax, you didn't have an email, you didn't have some Kenyan jogging from Kaduna to Lagos to give it in to you. You stood by that phone and he read the story to you. Now, if you have never had to take a story from somebody reading from someplace else, maybe reading the thing in an Igbo dialect, whereas you are Igbo and you don't understand, you can be there for 3 hours. When he says, and the governor said the place has fallen into disrepair, that one phrase can take you 10 minutes between two reporters to try to resolve. But today, we have cell phones, we have faxes, we have email, we have all kinds of things to get all kinds of media from one place to another. Unfortunately, the availability of reporting, of tools by which to report, has not affected the quality of report. If anything, it's made it worse. So you're right. I think that journalism has become a good, solid part of the problem that we have in many ways. So, and then the 1999 until now, there's also been more money available for people to engage in compromise. And unfortunately, some journalists, perhaps many, possibly most, have fallen into that trap.
Okay. Ovie, I think you have another question. Go ahead.
Yes.
Hold on. First, for those who are in the studio and if you want to join us, please turn on your camera so that we can let you in. If your camera is not on, I'm not going to let you into the studio. Go ahead, into the
Yeah. My earliest question was based off of Showore, and I think you briefly touched on it too. Showore complained bitterly during the last election how the main, as I would say, the established media, the legacy media as they are called, which is in terms of Nigeria, the AIT, the channels, the Arise, the NTA, he complained how they were not giving me enough airtime to even come to the studio and grant interview or cover his campaign. And he has his own media. For somebody like that who has a Sahara Reporters that reaches to millions across sub-Saharan African region, still complaining that these main guys are not giving enough space to reach out his message. How do you? That's my previous question was based off of that. That's why I said, how important is it for somebody to have an inch or an investment in that space to be able to control his own narrative? Because as we go on, we are pretty sure that these main media houses will focus on the highest bidder in terms of how they carry out their campaign and all that. Many people will not even cover people like Obi if he's in Meduguri, unless he's using his own is the internet-based, which at this point is pretty much look like and say is irrelevant in Nigerian policy as of today. We don't know about tomorrow. So that's where my question is coming from. Because if Showore can complain as at that time based on his popularity, so I wonder what people like Obi will, the fate they will suffer as the campaign train take off.
I believe there was greater justification for his complaining at that time than there is now, because the media is, in my view, much more diversified. There are many more tools for people to use, not just television, not just the newspapers. As I've said, most newspapers only print a few copies today. If you see copies on the streets, it just means that somebody has placed those copies there for a purpose. It does not mean that there are copies around the corner. Okay, they simply can't afford the newsprint. They simply can't. Maybe they have ink, they have all these other things, but they simply can't afford to print a lot. Now, given the insecurity in the country, even where they can afford to print a lot of copies, you put out 100,000 copies. Will they, how far can they get from each state capital into the interior today? So to that extent, you might say radio and TV are more important. And yes, they are, where people also have electricity and all that to follow. I feel that it's given that the bigger competitors, the bigger election seekers have established media houses, they may first appear to have the what do you call it, to be stronger on the ground. But that's also if you believe that if I am telling you, if I own a TV station and that TV station is speaking well of me, that every viewer is going to believe that TV station, over independent stations that report the environment. So to that extent, I feel that it's a little more the electoral landscape is a little more equal than it was even in 4 years ago, in 2018. So I'm hopeful about that.
Okay, so we're going back to NECA, but before that, let me throw in this question that I just thought about. 234 Next was started by Dele Olajide, and people were hopeful that it was going to transform the media landscape in Nigeria. And for a brief moment, he did. I don't know if you're aware of him and what he did and why he failed. And also, when you were talking about Sahara, you made reference that there was a time Sahara was very, very prominent, and then what happened? Do you see, we know that we have New York Times for more than 100 years, Washington Post. The media in other parts of the world, they tend to survive, but in Nigeria, it's more like they come out and they make a splash and then they fizzle out. What's going on from your own experience?
In Nigeria, media house is often at its peak when it starts, at its best, okay? Which is sad, because ideally that should be your starting point. You want to grow from there. If you can be that popular at the time that you take off, you can say, hey, the sky will not even be my limit. I'm going to rise far. But what often happens is that people are able to achieve such levels of excellence at the beginning because they hire the best professionals. That's the way to attract attention to yourself. So they hire. I remember when the Punch took off, I was in high school, and every time I saw this newspaper, I was so excited. When the Guardian took off, well, you guys old enough to see that, it was so exciting. You wanted to. I never for one day at the Guardian felt like I was going to work. It was like going to play with my friends. The standards were high. We pushed each other. For those of us on the editorial board, the final step that Dr. Stanley Makebu took to make sure that the quality was high was that he puts members of the editorial board on duty on one night after the other. So you will finish your regular work at the end of the day and go home, only to return around 10 p.m. to go and supervise production. Why? Because we wanted to make sure that what we thought we were producing, what we knew we could produce, was actually what people read the following day. Because if you spelled Rudolph in Rudolph Okonkwo with 2 U's, right? And in the morning, people saw it. You're saying this is the best newspaper, but people can see that you couldn't spell that name. Now, how much confidence are they going to have that the rest of the story, the substance, the text, you want to make sure that, because all of those little things account for the credibility. Okay, so we we would then have a situation where in subsequent years, the people who own the organization bring in their relatives, they bring in their friends who, because the organization is successful, I saw this in Concord as well. Because the organization is successful, they are coming in to share in that success without possessing anything that they can contribute to elevate the organization. That's why these organizations gradually come down. There are other factors, but this is the main issue in my view for why these organizations collapse. So instead of bringing more and more of the same quality of people, even better quality people, to elevate the organization, you are bringing people whose loyalty or whose mission is to suck the energy out of it. And that's why eventually you will just see them going down until they're no longer there.
Very, very good point. Nneka, go ahead.
Yeah, okay. Thank you again. I'm trying to make sure that I clearly understand what you're saying, especially when you were answering CM's question. Am I understanding it that initially was only one phone in an office, but now we have all this technology? So is it right if I say that with the more technology that we have, then people became very lazy to even investigate the stories that they put out there? Am I right if I make that assumption?
No, you're not right. What I was trying to say is that from having next to nothing in those days, professionals actually have everything now in terms of the equipment with which to work. Is that translating into better work? No. In many cases, no. I use the Punch as an example. So let me go back to the Punch. I think the Punch is doing very well today. You know, it's one of our better newspapers. They are maintaining very high standards. I don't know whether they will be that way tomorrow or next year, but they are doing very well. So I would say that the equipment, this ability now to convert modern technology into productivity is working out for them. In many cases, it's not, because the principal factor, the most important element, is not equipment. It may not even be the pay, the salary, good salaries. It may just be how much the organization at the top, at the higher levels, middle management and above, how much it believes that journalism is a calling that it shouldn't fall. It shouldn't fall before people who possess power. It shouldn't bow to power, to money, and other issues. Very often we see journalism cower before power. That shouldn't be. The journalism has a place in the Constitution. It's provided for in the Constitution. But if you make it clear to a politician that he can order you around, that for some kind of consideration, you can run the story differently, in his favor, in favor of his party or his government, then you have a problem. And we have many of those problems.
All right, we're rounding up. CM, one more chance to
okay,
go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, SO. I know, listening to you, in fact, I would like you to be with us for the next 24 hours talking journalism, because it's very,
Even
very
with these
refreshing.
eyes, are you not seeing the eyes?
yes, now no, forget about it's the voice that matter, not the eyes. It's what comes out. So what I want to ask you is, I don't know whether you've considered it.
CM is frozen. Okay, go
to the
ahead.
next generation.
Sorry, you were
okay,
frozen there for a
have
moment.
you thought about?
Can you start over?
Yeah, CM, start over because you were frozen. Yeah, okay.
Okay, yes. So sorry about that. I said, have you thought about the writing skill, the type of talent you have, passing it on to the next generation by way of teaching journalism, even if it's on pro bono, in just to help, because to bring up the standard to what it should be, at least from the discussion we've had with you, to bring up the standard in whatever way, whether formal or informal way of teaching back home. Just once in a while, you organize the new generation and then pass on your skill to them. Do you think that is something you could consider?
Well, only because you think that I have that talent. The talent I have is not table tennis. So. Table tennis player. What is the way I post for here? So, thank you very much. This is a subject that has bothered me for many years.
Good.
As you probably know, I'm not in the country at the moment, physically, but as I always tell people, when I traveled out of Nigeria, I discovered that Nigeria never traveled out of me. My spirit has always been in Nigeria. That I participate. I read Nigeria prodigiously. Following my master here, Rudolph, and keeping my, to keep abreast of what's going on. So yes, it's a subject that has, but not because I have so much talent in it, but because I'm committed to it. So yes, at the moment, there's a project that I'm involved with. We only just started. Hopefully, over the next few months, there'll be some information. I certainly would like to make it to contribute in that respect towards bringing some dignity and professionalism towards boosting the dignity and professionalism of journalists in Nigeria. There are many journalists that I respect in the country, but it's a flaw that's difficult for journalists to flourish in right now. Journalists have their own problems, but most of the problems are not really created by them. Maybe they internalize the problems and help to justify them some way or the other. But I'm not as interested in the older journalists like myself. I'm interested in the younger journalists. How can we help them so that a young man, a young woman who says, I want to be a journalist, I want to be a successful journalist, I want to be like those people that I see here and there that I read, how can we help them so that problems in the profession in the country notwithstanding, they get to achieve their ambition? So that's the question that we're trying to answer. Hopefully, we will to do it and do it right.
Okay, before we go to Obia for the final
One
question.
last one.
Yeah, I know. I'll come to you. Let me ask you this. I'm sure you've written more than 2,000 columns. Over the years. What is the best one? If you are asked to pick one, which one will you say this is my greatest column? Whatever way you measure it, the most impactful or whatever. Pick one that you could say this is.
That's difficult.
I know.
That's very difficult. They don't stand out in my mind. Sometimes when I see copies, in later years and I run into copies, I'm surprised. I'm surprised because I interviewed and wrote about people like Godwin Dabo and just Tarka from my very early days, my very early weeks in journalism. And I wrote opinions about them. Sometimes I will forget that I wrote about such people, and then I run into the copy again, and I'm surprised. I will run into Taka in later years at an airport, talk to him, and he would offer me a job on the spot. This was on a Saturday afternoon to start on the Monday, things like that. I think I could have been a very rich man, really, but I was not destined to be that way. So there are many of these things I really can't say. However, there was a copy that I did. It was not a column. It was an editorial at the Guardian, very early days. It was called Pregnant Brides, and there was an addition called Pregnant Bride Prices. I have it somewhere. I grew fond of that one.
Okay.
I like that.
Okay. Look, we are going to find it and we are going to make it public.
Exactly. We have to read it.
We have to find
Pregnant bride.
and make it public. Ovia, go ahead.
Yes,
Pregnant bride.
there's a saying that goes, a good newspaper is a country interacting with herself. So what do you think about media like channels and alikes who usually or permanently turn off their comment section on YouTube for reason best known to them? Do you think it's a good thing?
Wait, hold on. To add to that, the question should be: do you read your comments on your column, and what do you think about what people write? Because I can tell you that I do, like I said, I do write small columns, and sometimes you spend hours writing this column, and the first comment will be, "This is too long. Can somebody summarize this for me?" and you spent 8 hours writing this, and the people you are talking to are telling you, "Oh, this is too long. I can't read this."
Yes, I find that particularly for articles that are published online, because we publish them in a regular Nigerian newspaper, there may be no comments. They disable those things and there are no comments that come, or they permit a few comments and then cut off. I don't know what that is. I come back 2 years later, 3 years later, I run into an old article in Sahara Reporters, for instance, and I'm amazed that there are hundreds of comments. When did this happen?
Yes.
I don't, I'm surprised people are asking some questions. I'm seeing these questions years later. I read those comments. Some of them are good, as you well know. Some of them are bad, they discourage you. But hey, you can't stop. You really can't stop writing. Maybe that's who you are. So I say, right on.
All right. One last question. Recently I went through, so I was looking at my old columns, and I'm trying to see if I can put together a volume of compilation of old columns. Have you thought about that for those who are being introduced to you, the young people who may want to study journalism, who may want to learn how to write columns? Have you thought about putting together volumes or books from your old columns? Especially in the sense that sometimes you read something you wrote about Obasanjo in 1999, and it applies to Buhari in 2022. So
I wrote about him in 1975.
Oh, 75. Okay.
76, my first year in university. So for me, it's a long. Yes, I have thought about that. It's difficult to put many of those things together. Without meaning to bore you, remember when I left the Guardian, I actually worked at the Daily Times for about a year. Okay, yeah, for about a year when Yemi Ogunbiyi was running the place. And during that time, I worked in such a way that it was part-time. During that time, I wrote for Mr., which was owned by our friend, the actor now, Richard. And I wrote for Prime, owned by Muyiwa Adetiba. And over the years, I have found out that so in many of these publications, there are all kinds of things I can pick up. And of course, while I was at This Week too, I took time to write there. So I can put something together. It's just that in the context of Nigeria, it's difficult to do this research because we just don't maintain any archives. We don't know, apart from the Punch. I have everything I ever did at the Punch, because they do have an archive. But everywhere else, almost impossible to find. But yeah, it's a good idea, and I hope that I'm able to do it. And that the kids, it's of some help to some kids.
Oh, it will. I'm sure it will.
Rudolph, I have one short question you will like.
Okay, go ahead.
A couple of weeks back, Arise was interviewing the current APC chairman, Adamu. And the question was asked, what do you think is Buhari legacy? And in response, he said, Arise News.
Yes.
What do you think he meant by that?
Scandal. I've never been as scandalized. I saw it. I saw it. I've never been as scandalized as I was at that time.
Eso, eso, sorry. Is that the type you call esoterica?
I thought that was the moment that the Arise reporter needed to stand up for his organization and for the journalism in general. Because if Arise, I know does not belong to Buhari or to the government. I felt that the reporter needed to combat that chairman and put him in his place. But this is exactly how they see the country. It's like a joke, and we are not a joke. We shouldn't be run as a joke.
All right. So I want to thank. I know we could stay here for another 1 hour, 2 hours, but unfortunately, I'm not at home. I'm outside of my home base, and I have to leave. I want to thank Sonala so much for joining us today. Sonala, thank you so much.
Sonala, thank you.
And we are going to bring you back when we figure out what's going on with Thailand.
I just want to take a moment to apologize to everybody.
Yeah,
I will fix my eyes next time. I don't know what the problem is, but I'm going to find out what it is.
We're going to find out, and we'll bring him back. And
it's true.
Yeah,
it's
very important. And Obia, thank you so much for joining us. CM, thank you so much. Neka, thank you so much. There were people who were trying to join. I think they couldn't figure out how to turn on their camera. And on that, and I would say we will be back next week and with another guest. So stand by, like the video if you can, so that more people will watch it. And all the best, everybody. Sonala, thank you.
Thank you very much.